welcome to Creative Arts Apothecary. I'm your host, Marina Tselner, and I am so excited to introduce my guest, Deborah Price. Deborah is the founder and CEO of the Money Coaching Institute, which provides money coaching services and training to individuals, couples, and families. A former financial advisor for over 20 years, Deborah left the financial industry to pioneer the field of behavioral money coaching. Coping with money issues, both practically and psychologically, continues to be a major life struggle for millions of people, and yet there's very little help available. As a result, people often manifest money patterns, beliefs, and behaviors that can prevent them from experiencing their full financial potential. Deborah has developed a unique step-by-step coaching program that helps clients move beyond barriers to their personal and financial success. She's the author of Money Therapy, Using the 8 Money Types to Create Wealth and Prosperity, Money Magic, Unleashing Your Potential for Wealth and Prosperity, and her latest book, The Heart of Money, A Couple's Guide to Creating True Financial Intimacy. She is considered one of the foremost experts in her field and speaks and teaches globally. Deborah, welcome.
Thank you, Marina, so much for having me.
It's really such a treat. And I know some people may wonder, what do financial questions have to do with the creative life? But I know for a lot of us, it's right at the top of our list of questions. Yeah, so I'm really glad that you see this and you accepted the invitation to come speak with us. So I'm not making things up. This is a real thing. This is a question for everybody, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I myself am a creator artist archetype. That's one of my primary archetypes. So I really understand, and I have probably it's my favorite archetype to work with, quite frankly, because the creator artist, if they can begin to understand some of the very fairly typical patterns and behaviors that the creator artist archetype has, that once they understand that and they begin to heal that part of their story, the truth is the creator artist out of all the archetypes is always on the hero's journey. So, and that is one of the most powerful, noble journeys that a human being can embark upon in one's lifetime. So I really get it, and it's really my pleasure to be able to presence for all of you what the possibilities are and what they could be.
Amazing. Can you tell us more about these possibilities? You bring up archetypes and the hero's journey. So there's a lot of like Jungian language. Can you dive into that, please?
So my work, money coaching is a specialty area of coaching, and we call it money coaching because essentially money is either the cause or certainly peripherally involved in almost every decision that we make in our lives, particularly about work and purpose. And therefore, if we're not in, excuse me, I'm recovering from a bad cough. If we're not engaged around how money impacts and influences us, what can happen is that the creator artist efforts and their greater purpose and their potentiality gets thwarted by the more subconsciously driven patterns and behaviors. So I'll just give you an example, right? So I had a client many years ago who was a brilliant sculptor and painter. And she was really challenged by the material world. She was making her living as a landscape designer. And she was quite talented and creative at that too. But what she really wanted to do was leave the country and go live in Europe and travel and paint and do sculpture. And she was just kind of at a place where she was becoming depressed and like, this is just never going to work, and I'm never going to be able to do what I came to do because of the money. And what happens for a lot of the creator artists is money is often the great obstacle to be overcome. And it can build a lot of resentment and pain and suffering for people because you have all these gifts and you know that this is what you came to do and to express. But there's this brick wall here called, how do I do and be this when I have to also pay my bills? And then, of course, there are all these messages that we've heard along the way, which is you're never going to make a living as an artist or as a thought leader or as a whatever, an inventor, because a creator artist isn't necessarily just a person who is a fine artist or a sculptor or, somebody who works with their hands even. It could be somebody who just has the kind of mind that thinks above and beyond the average person, right? So there are many flavors of that. And my creator artist is different than yours, and we're all different, right? But the messages that we can receive early on as the creator artist archetype is that it's not okay to be who we are because we won't make it. You won't financially survive. And very few people actually grow up in an environment where they are supported to be exactly who it was that they saw and imagined and hoped they could be, when they have that primary archetype. So let's say that the creator artist then they're on this hero's journey, which is they're hearing all this stuff from an early childhood age, and they've decided because they hear this other call, and the other call is, I don't care what you say, I must do this. I don't have a choice. And so they leave then the comfort of the secure family community that they had, and they decide to embark upon this journey of, I'm going to do this somehow, some way. And as they cross over that threshold into the unknown, reality begins to sink in, which is, oh my God, I still don't know how I'm going to take care of myself. And nobody, by the way, does a very good job rather of helping us with that, regardless of your underlying archetypes. Most of us are kind of thrown out into the world saying, well, I figured it out, somehow you will, and I don't know about most of you, but you might want to just reflect for a moment. Did anybody ever really show you the way, how to be in the world where you could be who you are, do what you came to do, and source and sustain your life? Almost no one. And I've coached thousands of people worldwide. So we're already kind of at a deficit, regardless of your archetype. But then the creator artist, who's often has to constantly assert their value because what they're bringing to the world isn't necessarily highly valued by the majority of people anyway, right? I live in a home filled with, original art of many different artists. I have a great appreciation, but, not everybody does. And as a more thought leader, inventor type archetype myself, believe me, no one had a great appreciation for what I had to bring forward in the beginning either. Nor was there a pathway that was just laid for me to be able to say, oh yeah, I'm going to start this work called money coaching that nobody's ever heard and pioneer an entirely new field that helps people heal their money dynamics. So, we're all kind of sent out there. And if we have a different calling, we're going to probably fall along the way because we just don't have the skills or the tools or the wherewithal to know. And therefore we will make mistakes. But I don't actually think any of these are true mistakes. I think it's just part of our journey. But what we must do at some point in time, if it's not working, we have to figure out how to make it work. We have to course correct. And much of that journey is healing that old story that said you can't be, do, and have what you really want. Because as long as that story is embedded and some part of you believed it, it will become the thing that you will always be up against. So archetypally, what every good creator artist needs is a support team. And the support team is one that you have to cultivate within. So everybody needs a good, healthy warrior because the warrior archetype is really the one who should drive. And you as the creator artist, you get to be in the back seat and you're going to basically give the directions because you know where you're going. You have your vision. You know what you'd like to create. You just maybe haven't found the right path yet and how to do it. But that's the great thing about the warrior is tasked with mastering the material world. And so we have to empower these parts of ourselves rather than become dissociated with them. And then the warrior needs a co-pilot, navigator, and that's the magician. The magician is tasked with mastering the inner world. And when we have a really powerfully developed warrior and a magician, and they are working together on behalf of the creator artist who has the greater vision, right? Who really has something to express that they must. That's not their job. That their job is not to drive. Because if the creator artist were driving often, they'd go, oh, that's really interesting. Let's go down that road. Or I really like to do that too. Let's do that. The creator artist has too many ideas and things and possibilities, so they can be distracted easily. So that's why we don't let them drive. But they still are pretty much calling the shots from the back seat, right? It's like having your own chauffeur, right? So the trick is, how do we develop these aspects that we may have even named bad, wrong, or the last thing ever want to do is master money, right? So I can only ask you, Marina, in your life as a creator artist, doing what it is that you're doing, how have you felt about really deeply engaging in the world of money and how to master that?
Wow. Yeah. I identify with the way that you talk about money being not just like a logical thing, because like, oh, maybe if I were better at math, but instead that it's, also emotional and and beyond
Behavioral.
just logic. Yeah, and behavioral. And that really connects with me, where if I ever thought of money as dangerous and wanted to stay away
Mhm.
from danger, that explains a lot of like my positioning as I started off, for sure. But that's something I really connected, and I appreciated that you saying that, because I'm like, no, I am good at math. Oh, so what is it? So what is
Right.
it?
It's never about the numbers. In fact, quite frankly, it's not even about the money. See, money is a deeply held uh, symbolic resource in our life. But because of our own associated memories and experiences and hardwired behaviors that happen at very early ages, often we have some patterning that we have learned that we are completely unaware of. And these patterns develop usually as a result of pain and suffering. And that varies from one human to the next. But in my experience, it doesn't matter where you were born, how much money your parents had, whatever the socioeconomics were, none of that really matters much, because these are patterns that are held in the collective unconscious, and the entire world is battling the same patterns all the time. It's just that we've never really had a language or a way of helping people to process, to understand that if you've got subconsciously driven patterns, and I will use the metaphor of the car and these archetypes, right? So imagine, because nobody just has one archetype, all 8 of the money types that I've developed in the system that I use with people, all 8 of those archetypes are inside of us. It's just a question of who has the most speaking parts and who's driving the car. And also, we can often have archetypes that just constantly they're moving in and out from behind the wheel. You remember that game we liked to play when we were teenagers, the Chinese fire drill? Well, think about that in terms of your archetypes. You make a stop, you're all of a sudden in a conversation with somebody in your car. Next thing you know, they ask you a question, and you have a Chinese fire drill, and there's another archetype now in the driver's seat. So relative to your experience, each person's individual experience, you will develop archetypal patterns, behaviors, and emotions that are specific to you and your experience. So let's say for myself, I'm driving, creator artist is in the back. I think I know where I'm going. I've got my magician next to me, and we're making some good time, and we think we're going in the right direction. And all of a sudden, over here, I spot a wonderful, pretty, shiny object on the side of the road, and I'm just going, "Wow! I've got to stop and have that. I need that right now." And so we stop, and all of a sudden, the door opens. Warrior gets in the trunk, and the fool comes and starts to drive, takes me over to the shiny object and says, we have to have this. Now the warrior's no longer in the car, so the warrior's not present to say, is that actually in your best interest right now? Is it something that you really need to have right now? Or is this an impulsive decision? Let's really stop and think about this. Once the warrior's not driving, the fool takes over. And next thing you know, you're having an experience where you're doing something impulsive. And then, depending upon your financial circumstances, there could be consequences, right? So in the moment, it feels good. You may even get a little hit of dopamine, which is that wonderful little neuro chemical that produces a temporary feeling of euphoria. So now you bought the thing that you may not have needed. You didn't think about whether or not that was in keeping with your financial situation. And then you got a little high off of it. So your brain is going to remember all of that. So remember, we have to remember that the human brain is not designed for the practical side of money, unlike what many people don't, would fail to understand. We have a great rational, logical brain, but it's not usually in charge a lot of the time. And the only way you know that part of your brain is in charge is if the warrior's driving and the magician's riding next, because those two archetypes live in the thinking brain. So they're more rational, logical, and or spiritually aligned with who you are, right? And wherever we have misalignment, we're actually sabotaging our own creator artist. We just don't realize we're doing it at the time, right? So the warrior then continues to drive until maybe at some other point you stop, you have lunch. The fool drives until you stop, you have lunch. I'm being very metaphorical here. And then the warrior gets back in. But these things and these experiences of the different archetypes are happening to all of us every day. And so part of what we learn is how to witness and observe the various archetypal patterns that we have once you've learned about them. And in my work, we map that out in such a clear and visible way that there's no second guessing anything. You become very clear who's trying to sabotage you and who's actually working for you. So in my universe, we refer to it as intention versus counter-intention. The most intentional archetypes natively are the warrior, the magician, and the creator artist. Very, very intentional. But the reason the creator artist struggles so much is that they have so many early negative patterns in messaging that often throw them off, that make them much more emotionally driven. And if our emotions are in charge completely of all of our decisions, then we are going to make some mistakes, right? We don't want to make all of our decisions from an emotional or even an instinctive basis. So we have to become very aligned. And so I like to think of the creator artist joining forces with the warrior magician, and we're just going to call them the holy trinity of archetypes. Because when they are working together and they are in harmony, the conflict gets released, and that creator artist has true capacity to create and to make money and to source and sustain their lives without all the interference or counter-intention from the other archetypes that we really just want to keep in the trunk. Every once in a while, you can take them out to the beach and let them play, but do not let them in the car, because those other archetypes, the innocent, just doesn't know what they don't know, and they have a lot of fear and anxiety, so they're troublesome. But that's also the wounded child. And so we have to look at the innocent aspect of everyone and help the person to heal whatever parts of the story are that belong to the innocent. Then we can have a victim. The victim archetype arises out of pain and suffering, the things that happen to us. But with the creator artist, the story around that can be a story that they get entrenched in. It's the why I can't be, do, or have what I want story. And so we have to process through that and really move beyond the story from victim to victorious. And so there's a commitment to really having to see and be with the aspects of that archetype. And by the way, not everybody has all of these actively engaged. Some people have them in a more passive capacity, and some people work really hard and they have actually resolved that archetype. So it's really very much a dormant archetype and not impacting the person at all. And that's where you want to get, where the more challenging archetypes become resolved and they then become dormant, and then they're no longer counter intending or creating any challenges for you. So the victim is probably the highest challenge of any of the archetypes. And that's because it's entrenched in a story of the past. And if you're holding too tight to the story of the past, it's really hard to write one for the future. Very difficult to hold both places. So we have to decide, do we want to hold on to this story or do we want something new? And if we want something new, the story has to be relinquished, but it's easier said than done. It really has to have a process associated with it, right? So the other archetypes that create challenges for us are the martyr. Although the martyr has tremendous wisdom and is often very much a servant leader archetype and has this huge heart that wants to be of service and truly can be of service because they're very wise. Their shadow dimension is one of, I have to be the one who gives everything, give, and really I don't have any container for receiving. And therefore I suffer and I take care of everybody, but I never really get my own needs met. Okay. So that archetype could potentially very challenging. And then we can have the fool. And the thing about the fool is that the fool's always the most fun because the fool also usually has that more dopamine driven impulsivity kind of behavior. So you get a little high off the fool. And the fool's adventurous and, just always going to be the most fun. But the fool, because of impulsivity and sort of a lack of core discipline, they can become a quite challenging archetype with money. And I want to also have a point of clarification, which is we're not just talking about money in money coaching ever. We're talking about all the various threads of money that get very wrapped up in our daily lives and experiences with respect to our personal finances, which in my universe is the least important because most people can change their personal financial circumstances just by learning to manage their archetypes once they've healed the parts of their story that are, where the pain is. But it also weaves itself around our relationships to partners, our children, our parents, and to our employers. Anywhere where there's an authoritarian or hierarchical system where one person has more power than the other and there's money involved, there's something to work on, right? We then also have money impact our work, our sense of purpose and meaning in the world. It can even affect our spiritual self and our connection to whatever God or, spiritual perspective that you have. Because when we don't get what we want and we feel we really worked hard to have it, we can feel betrayed by God or spirit. So there are many ways in which this stuff weaves around many, many facets of our lives. And we don't necessarily even name it as even related to money. But in my universe, it's all very interconnected. And you can kind of see money is at the hub. And these are spokes of our lives in the wheel. And if the money piece in the middle, the hub, isn't working, then all the other pieces become affected, right?
Absolutely. Yes. It's brilliant. It's so juicy. I mean, it's everything that we talk about in these creative circles, rewriting your story. And I mean, so it's so good. And I really appreciate that you bring in the spiritual component because a lot of artists that I talk to, it's not something against money per se, but there's this division inside. There's material, spiritual, can't connect. And I love how you fuse the two. And it's just really empowering. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to understand that, if we're born into a material world, then that has to be part of our spiritual journey. And when we deny that, we actually are creating a challenge that doesn't even need to exist because it's not about choosing one world over the other. It's about the integration of the worlds so that as they become more integrated and we don't make money the problem, because I don't know about you, but I have never seen money get up out of my wallet and do anything to me. It's never done that, right? Money is actually not the culprit. The problem is all the pain, shame, and experiences that we've had that have created subconsciously driven patterns that then take on a life of their own. And we're just kind of sitting here observing, going, I don't know what just happened or how that happened, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't a good thing. And I don't even know what to do about it. I don't even know how I ended up here, right? Because we are relatively unconscious about these dynamics, and that's nobody's fault. If we realized how much stuff is packed in our subconscious and the patterns that we're carrying and don't even know and haven't even named, you would be shocked. We have to understand. I mean, my work is very neuroscience and brain based because I realize that even though I have a strong spiritual perspective and I can see it through many different lenses, the fact of the matter is that many of these things are physiological as well as mental, emotional, behavioral challenges. Because we don't just have one brain. So here's just a little brain stuff, right? We have three brains. The first brain we all got is the instinctive brain, that old hunter-gatherer brain. And the challenge with this old brain, even though we only have a remnant in it, is that it is wired to survive. It is wired to react to keep us out of harm's way. It is also very much wired for desire. And it does not see money as a practical utilitarian tool. This part of the brain kind of sees money more like food. It's a commodity. It's an object of pleasure. And this system was set up in neurodynamically long before money even existed in the world. Because hunter-gatherers, they didn't have money. They would go out every day. They'd hunt, they'd gather, they'd take it home, they'd eat it raw, and satiate, go to sleep. Next day, you have to do it all over again, right? So it took us a long time to actually grow into the mammalian brain. And so brain 2.0, the next edition, was kind of, like you kind of wonder who was in charge of that, because that edition actually was kind of challenging in and of itself, because suddenly we had to create this new brain that would store all of our memories, histories, and experiences. The thing about this part of the brain is that it has a tendency to latch onto the painful and hold really tight, because that's its way of trying to protect us. If you remember the bad stuff, maybe you won't have to do it again, right? The challenge is that these memories become very sticky, and we as human beings are natively avoidant of pain. If we were okay with just revisiting pain and realizing that it's not happening again, we're just going to try to understand it and heal it. If we could just go there and realize that we won't die if we do that, we won't break, and we were able to process and heal these things that happen to us as we become adults, then we wouldn't have so much damaged sectors in our own emotional brain that are influencing our every decision subconsciously, right? So, for example, I have a client who grew up with a father who just was a ne'er-do-well guy. He never really made any money. He was kind of a little bit of a con artist. And so he'd have 10 cars in the driveway one day, and the next month there would be no cars. And they were knocking on the door saying, you got to get out, and they'd be evicted, right? So lots of instability, lots of challenge for this client. She grows up. Oh, and then she had a mother who was mentally ill, who was a shut-in. So this little girl grew up pretty much alone and never knowing where the next meal was really coming from, if dad was going to come home, whether they could pay the rent or the lights would go out or whatever, right? So she's very smart, went to school, became an attorney, made very good money, as did the man she married. At the time that she called me, she was convinced her husband was going to put them in the poorhouse. In her mind, she was going to leave him. So I said, I think we need to get your husband in on this. There's something, I think I need to hear his side, because it appears that you have a very strong feeling about his behavior, but I'm curious how he would perceive the situation. We get him in, and what I learn about him is that he's highly responsible. He's always been an incredibly good, powerful earner, and he is really in charge of the money in a very big way. But sometimes he, for example, would like to treat his wife to something special. So he planned to get this entire new backyard landscaping with a big sauna jacuzzi in the backyard, blah, blah, blah. Whole thing was 50 grand. It was her anniversary present. She was on a business trip in the UK. She comes back, she sees it. She basically says, I want a divorce. You can't spend this kind of money without talking to me. And I'm tired of you spending our money and putting us in the poorhouse. And at one point I just said, so tell me, how much money do you have? I just need to kind of have a sense. He says, well, our financial advisor who we met with earlier says, we've got $50 million in various investments, and we have no debt, and we own all of our property outright, and our children's educations are completely paid for. We don't have any financial problems, which is my point about how it's never about the money. So after working with them a couple of times, she one day sent me an email first thing in the morning and said, I'm starting to understand. Her husband was laying in bed. He hadn't been feeling well. She walked in and saw him laying there and started screaming at him because he was supposed to take their daughters to breakfast. It was her birthday. And she assumed that he had just forgotten, was letting them all down. And she started yelling, and he said, hey, the girls and I are fine. I told them to come and get me when they're ready. I'm just laying here. I'm dressed. She storms out, gets halfway down the hallway, and then she has a flash. Her emotional brain pulled a file from the past, and she saw herself at the age of 7 on her birthday, in bed, alone. No one came to her. There were no presents. There was no birthday. There was no nothing. And that's the way she was in her life. She was totally ignored, and she never had a birthday party or anybody really show up for her. And that old memory was now being projected onto her husband, i.e., you're just like my dad, even though he's not. But that's what happens when we have unhealed wounds, is that these wounds will become projected onto others. We don't know we're doing it, and the other person's looking at you are you crazy? Why are you bringing this up? This isn't even an issue. This isn't even real to me. But the person at the moment is convinced that they're doing it. And yet it's not real. So that's what we all have to do, is we all have to excavate in a way that is really powerful but gentle. These parts of our story that have created patterns that are become projections into our current life and the future that have no business being there and will do nothing but create more pain and more suffering. And so the journey is one of really deep exploration till you really name it, what it all is, and then you really work in a very committed way to understand how these parts of yourself got created. And in that they were created, they can be uncreated, and new things, new ways of being can develop. But it's very hard to hold both places, right? And that's what's happening, is that you have the creator artist trying to hold this vision over here, and I'm doing as much as I can, but you have all this other stuff over here that you haven't even named, and it is working day and night in the background. And as I say, I have the title of my next book is called Your Pain is Coming for You, because it is. We can't hide from it. And if we don't deal with it, it'll deal with us. And it's that simple. But we have to be really brave. And that's why we need that warrior. Because a warrior knows, it's like, I got this, I can handle it. And the magician is that archetype who sources from within this deep reservoir of both compassion for ourselves and a real commitment to forgiveness of self and others, and who really can hold you in a place of greater possibility and will be there and guide and support you throughout the journey of figuring out what happened and why it happened and how you can transform that into something new and better and different to get you where you want.
So good, so good. And that we all have these archetypes within us is great. You know, oh, I don't have that one. I don't. We can rewrite that story and pull forward, coax forward.
That's right.
um,
And learning, some people will say, well, a lot of creator artists often have a negative reaction to the idea of really being an embodied warrior because they were wounded often by who they perceived as the warrior, which could be mom or dad, or some other, could even be a societal thing, right? That the warrior is bad, but not in our universe. The warrior is the archetype of being grounded, focused, doing the right thing for the right reasons. It really is the spiritual warrior. And that part of us needs to be claimed and owned fully. And those muscles developed so that we are fully capacitated, because the creator artist alone seldom rises fully to the occasion to become who they can fully be.
I'm so glad I'm taking it all in. It's just it's good. The wisdom. It's like honey for the heart.
Thank
It's
you.
it's very inclusive, and like I said, empowering in a gentle way that just opens up all this possibility. And I hear a lot from artists. I can't create anything. I have to wait until I figure out these problems, and I can appreciate that. But if they're lifelong problems, then and we wait until who knows.
Exactly. And you can wait away your life, because the perfect circumstances rarely present themselves in the right time. But what I like people to know is the perfect circumstance to begin to heal whatever part of your life and your story and your archetypes needs to be, really understood and healed. The perfect timing for that is always now.
Beautiful,
Because if
beautiful.
you can just choose it now, then your future can be very, very different. But I think we underestimate how powerful the story can be, and how, at a subconscious level, we can be resistant to relinquishing the story.
Mm. That resonates. Yeah. If it's something that we've been holding on to for
Yeah,
so long, and it's a part of us. And
it's the badge of honor.
mm, mm,
The problem is that it's very unfulfilling in the long run, because it becomes the reason why you didn't do something, as opposed to the evidence of what you did instead, when you decided that you can keep the badge as a representation of the past, but if you only have that one badge and you didn't move toward what could be next and what else is possible, and realize that anything that is not serving us in this moment and beyond must be relinquished, because we can't hold them both, right? And so I always like to tell people, we do underestimate the power of the decision.
mm.
All you have to do is decide. I am going to surrender this for now. I'm not letting it go and saying that it was wrong or it was bad, or naming it anything other than everything that happens to you up to now is a blessing. Everything. Because had all that not happened, you would not be who you are. However, if where you are is not working for you, then that chapter, that page must be turned. That book must be closed. You thank it, you bless it, you learn from it, and then you go, I'm now writing a new story. And I'm changing evolving, and committed to figuring this piece out. And I will not give up until it's done. And I have risen victorious, you know?
So
And boy, do I
encouraging.
live. I'm sorry.
So encouraging. So encouraging.
Well, I see it every day, you know. I've been doing this work for 25 years. And, you know, I have clients all over the world, and often people come and, you know, like I said, I love working with the creator artist. It's such a powerful archetype, and the world needs the creator artist now more than ever. You know, we've become too bogged down in tech, and, you know, we're people of the mind, and the mind will only get you so far in life. And so we must have the creator artist rise, but the creator artist has to decide to rise
Hmm.
and take your rightful place in society as a force of power and a force of good, right?
Absolutely. And your books are very helpful in that you spell out, you give very specific steps that people can take. What can you say a little bit more about that or
So I've written a few books, but I would say the books I mostly recommend for your audience would be the book called Money Magic, which you can find on either Audible or paperback or Kindle even. And that book is really kind of the baseline foundation of my work from the standpoint of the journey that needs to be embarked upon to truly understand um, what what happened. And the challenge is, of course, most people, because of our own blind spots, it's hard to do the work. I mean, I recommend that people do the work in all those exercises that are in that book because it will lead you somewhere important. The challenge and why I developed the Money Coaching Institute is that so that we could have coaches worldwide who could spot those places within a person and their dynamics that they simply cannot see because they're too close to it. You know, the object's a little too close to the mirror, therefore it is distorted. And coaching actually brings this place of objectivity where the person who's trained can look and say, yeah, you got all this. This is great. You've done a great job. But what about this piece? And the person goes, oh, I didn't even see that. That's right. Let's talk about that. Right. So, Money Magic is a great book to get started on that journey. The only challenge is if you find things aren't shifting, it means because you haven't actually named everything. And when we can't name something, it's really difficult to change it. Right. And then I've written a book for those of you that are in relationships, marriages, partnerships. It doesn't matter. The Heart of Money is my book that really helps couples. And I often find that creator artist archetypes have challenges in their primary relationships. Unless you're with someone, like I was married to a creator artist who made a decision in his 30s that he wasn't going to be able to make it as a musician and an artist. He was both a musician and a fine artist. And so he said, I'm going to sacrifice this part of myself. He cuts his arm off, you know, metaphorically, and he becomes a businessman. Well, because of this dynamic, as a businessman, he also struggled because you're going to take the challenge with you everywhere. We can't amputate a part of ourselves and just say, I'm going to ignore this part of myself and go out into the world because that creator artist now is a phantom limb and it's going to be speaking to you all the time. Right.
mm,
So we have to become more integrated. So my husband suffered a lot and he did become a pretty successful businessman, but he was never totally happy at it, you know, and he ended up getting very sick. And I lost him a year and a half ago to prostate cancer.
so
And he and
sorry.
I have had many conversations before he died about how this part that he cut off, you know, when he was dying those last couple of years, all he did was art and poetry. And then he lost his ability to even hold a guitar, so he couldn't perform music anymore. But I'm saying this because I don't want that to happen to anybody. And I think that we actually create a lot of disease, disconnection, etc., as a result of not healing these parts of ourselves and the pain and suffering that ensues. Just because you choose another path and you look like you've gone into warrior doesn't mean you've actually solved the whole problem. And that is a very slippery slope for people. And now I'm really speaking more metaphorically and at a deeper spiritual level. All of our choices have potential consequences that we may not realize at the time. And so that's why integration is much more better than separation and dissociation from these parts of ourselves that we name good, bad, wrong, or whatever.
And you have a generous gift for the audience, which I wrote it down, Behavioral Money Coaching Magazine.
Sure. So the Behavioral Money Coaching Magazine was kind of like my little baby because, I'm also a creator, artist, and a writer, but I wanted to provide something that maybe was a little bit easier, bite-sized pieces for people to be able to take in and reflect upon. So I got some people together, other coaches and people that are dear to me, and we created this little magazine, and we'd love to share it with you. So, and the other thing is just another little freebie that you're welcome to is if you go onto my website at moneycoachinginstitute.com and you take the money type quiz, and there will be a place where you put your name and you just put your name in, your phone number and your email, and you after your name you put / Marina's podcast, and I will then know you were on the podcast and I will contact you for a money type consultation if you would like. And then you get to learn a little bit about your own archetypes and how they're influencing you or perhaps creating challenges for you that you might want to become more aware of and consider doing some deeper work on.
Thank you so much. Just one more question, if I may.
Of course.
So is this once we're in alignment and does it stay that way, or like do you have to bring yourself back? So how do you use your own practice to?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I appreciate it when people ask that question because I believe, and I was just teaching one of my classes because I train people to do this work as well. And this woman said, I've been working with this woman and she was doing really well. And then all of a sudden this old archetype started coming back. And I said, oh, good. What you do is you just welcome them. Go, come on in. Let's talk. Why are you here? So you engage, you learn to have a really open dialogue with these parts of yourselves when you observe them, that they have returned. Because they're almost always there as a teacher and an ally to show you where you have yet to understand, where you still need to grow, right? And so we never name any of these parts of ourselves as bad, wrong, fixed, then they are certainly not your personality, okay? They are aspect of ourselves that are trying to express, trying to get our attention. So just like the naughty or little kid that's misbehaving in the moment, right? They're trying to get your attention and they feel ignored sometimes. And so the more ignored they are, the more they're going to rise. And therefore, all we need to do is bring them in, sit them in your lap and say, okay, so tell me what's going on, honey. What's up? And let them express. So I have people do a lot of automatic writing when they observe that an archetype that they thought they had resolved is coming back up. Don't ever worry that all the work is gone. It's not like that. And my challenging archetype is the martyr archetype. And so she and we have an agreement. If I notice her, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a moment here and we're just going to talk. What's going on? And I'll just write, well, you've been working me way too hard. We haven't had any fun lately. And all you do is take care of everybody else. And when is it my turn? And I go, you're right. I'm really sorry. I have been doing that. And I'm really sorry. So what can we do? What do you need right now? I'll say, well, it'd be nice if we could just go take a walk at the ocean. Why did you move here to the beach? And we haven't even been on the beach all day, all week. So, okay, we're going to take a walk. And, and I'm not necessarily having these conversations spoken out loud. I'm a little crazy, but I'm not that crazy. Although I don't really see anything wrong with it, quite frankly. But, mostly I'm writing or I'm just reflecting inside. I'll go into a meditative state and I'll touch base with this part of myself and just ask it, what's up and what do you need? And then as you handle it, they just are like, thank you. Thank you for noticing me and for helping me. And then they'll be gone. But one thing you can't do with an archetype that is a high challenge is neglect it. If you neglect that archetype and don't understand that it has needs, and we humans, we're very good at self-neglect. Unfortunately, these are learned behaviors. And so as we recognize that and we step into a different conversation and never naming it wrong or bad, it changes everything. And by the way, if any of you are martyrs and creator artists, you could perhaps be eligible for membership to this very important club that I have called the Sisterhood of the Traveling Martyrs. I'm the president, and I'm teasing you, but boy, this particular archetype, it can be a very big challenge to the creator artist because there's a lot of conflict there. It's about who I'm supposed to be versus what I'm supposed to do. And the conflict between be and do can be quite big for people.
And yet so much hope from automatic writing to identifying. This is key. You say identifying your archetype and a community, whether it's through mentorship, through friends, that support community, all of these great things.
And I forgot to tell you this, Marina, if any of you might be interested, I will be doing something called a money coaching circle, most likely in the month of January. And these are groups where I like to pull them in by archetype. So if you have a primary creator artist archetype, this group will be a group where creator artists convene together to do some work together with myself as a facilitator.
Beautiful. What a great invitation. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's been wonderful speaking with you.
You are so welcome. I wish you all the luck in the world. If I can be of service to any of you, please reach out, and I wish you well.
Remember to keep it creative and have a wonderful day.